Okay, so faith and works or faith alone. We heard what the Bible really says. What does the church really say? Well, here's what the church says in her own words. This is from the Catechism, 1991 in the Catechism. It says, justification, which is being made right with God, is the acceptance of God's righteousness through faith in Jesus Christ. It goes on to say, justification has been merited for us by the passion of Christ. And then it goes on to say, no one can merit the initial grace of forgiveness and justification. It says, the charity of Christ, or the love of Christ, is the source of all of our merits before God. And then it even says, with regard to God, there is no strict right to any merit on the part of man. In other words, you can't earn anything. Grace, or salvation, is a gift of God's grace. That's what it says right in the Catechism. It says a similar thing in the Joint Declaration on Justification. It says this, it says, justification is the forgiveness of sins, and this is from God alone, for Christ's sake, by grace, through faith in the gospel of God's Son. It goes on to say, we confess together that all persons depend completely on the saving grace of God for their salvation. Justification takes place by God, solely by God's grace. Only by God's grace are we saved. We can't earn God's grace. We can't earn it. There's no way to earn God's grace. There's no strict merit on the part of man. Finally, it says, we confess that sinners are justified by faith in the saving action of God. Such a faith is active in love and thus cannot and should not remain without works. But whatever in the justified precedes or follows the free gift of faith is neither the basis of justification nor merits it. So it sounds like the church is saying that we're saved by God's grace, which we receive in faith. But then it also does use this other language. It does say that we can merit for ourselves the graces needed for sanctification, becoming holier, and the increase of grace and charity, and even for the attainment of eternal life. So if we can't earn God's grace, how do we earn God's grace? Well, it all goes back to this phrase again in 2007 of the Catechism. With regard to God, there is no strict right to any merit on the part of man. You can't earn God's love, but you can cooperate with it. And when you cooperate with God's love and obey it and work in cooperation with it, that there's a grace that we receive just by cooperating with God's love, on God's grace. So in that sense, you can earn God's grace, but really it's just by cooperation. In the end, it's God's grace that saves us. We accept it by having faith in God, and that's how we receive it. When we do good works, we are doing good works because we have a sincere faith, and that faith, demonstrated through those works, provides God's grace in our salvation. But in the end, you can't earn heaven. In no strict sense can we merit anything. In the end, it's really the grace of God that saves us and nothing else. Just the grace of God that we receive by faith and that we cooperate with in our works. I hope that helps.